When I came to the United States, the immigration guy asked me my name, and I said, Adil Jonna. He said, no, you're Eddie Jonna. And that's how my name became Eddie Jonna. I was born in Baghdad, Iraq on St. Patrick's Day in 1939. Well, my father, originally, we owe a lot to my father. My father was one of the smartest businessmen I ever met in my life. And he, in 1928, the dinar was devaluated, and my father and my grandfather were merchants. They used to go in the mountains and bring merchandise to sell in Baghdad. Unfortunately, the dinar deflated that year, and they lost their whole shipment. So they were totally broke. And my father told my grandfather, I'm leaving. He says, where are you going? He says, I'm going to America. Why are you going to America? Because there's a guy by the name of Ford that's giving you $5 a day to work, and I'm going. He said, you don't even know where America is. You don't have no money. So it took him almost a month, no, 2.5 months to come to the United States. From one boat to another, working, and he landed in, I think it was New England somewhere, and he asked, where's Detroit? They said, keep going. Actually, it was Boston he landed, and they told him to keep going. So then he came to Detroit and worked only 2 months for Ford. He was such an entrepreneur. Him and another Chaldean started a food store. And it was during the Depression, unfortunately. My father used to tell me where chickens were 5 cents, butter was 2 cents, but nobody had 2 cents, nobody had 5 cents. So he worked 10 hard years here to make enough money to go and they wanted to bring my mother and my 2 brothers, which he left in the old country, and bring them back. He wanted to make enough money to bring them, but unfortunately he didn't, because it was at bad times. So in 1938, he came back to Baghdad, Iraq, with a tremendous knowledge of the food and wine business, and actually Iraq and all that. So he opened a store called Jonna on the Faisal Bridge, and it became very, very famous Iraq store and wine. And I used to remember, I was only 10 years old, and I used to take his lunch in a safar toast, is that what it's called? And we used to live in Karada, so I used to come all the way from Karada and bring him his lunch, and it was a magnificent store, and it became very famous. And that's where he made his money, but it took him from 1939 to 1949, November 28th. We were already 5 brothers and 1 sister, so he put us all on a plane and brought us to America, because his heart was always in America. The situation was wonderful. Baghdad, Iraq was flourishing, and we lived in a very great area called Karada. So I loved Baghdad. I thought it was one of the most beautiful places in the world. I had a good life, but my father's heart was always coming back to America. So I didn't have the problems that other people had with Baghdad. He believed that the future for us was America. Although he had a successful life, he was always afraid of the government and persecution of religion. And he didn't feel comfortable with that. So he wanted to educate us to the country. And when he was exposed to America for 8 to 10 years, that's where he wanted to come back. His heart always belonged to the United States. When I came to America, I was only 10 years old. And what I did once I got to America, I went to a school called Hutchinson School, and where we took, in 1 year, 3 grades from 1st to 3. Then the second year, from 3 to 6. And then in the third year, 6 to 9. And I graduated 3 years in 3 years, what took other people 9 years to graduate. And then I went to Cathedral Central School and took my high school education there. And from there, I always, every day, worked in the store. I didn't know what it was to own a bike or what it is to do anything. All I did was go to school, from school, catch the bus, go to work at my dad's store, came home at night, and repeated it. All my childhood was that. No, you know what? To be honest with you, what I remember, I fit like a glove. I didn't have no problem. I didn't have any problem because my father had taught us English as he came back, and I was just accumulated to speaking with other children in the school, and I never had a hard time. I wanted to be an American the day I got here. My dad lived at 1915 Longfellow Street. That was, anybody knows, the Chicago Boulevard, Boston Boulevard. So my father bought us a great house. And from there, he had a store on Brush and Brewster, and it was called Union Pacific Market. And I says, why Union Pacific? He says, because one day I'm going to be like the railroad. I'm going to have 100 stores from New York to California. And that's the railroads, and that's how they became. And one of his things that he was so smart in business that I remember I was only 11 years old when he bought the store. And I said, he said to me, Eddie, I want you to order a sign for me. I says, really? And he says, yeah. He says, order the sign, the best hamburger in the world. I says, okay. I says, the guy on the phone wants to know how much. He said, just say the best hamburger in the world. So he put the sign up, and I says, why just say the best hamburger in the world? People aren't going to come. He says, they're going to come because I'm going to make the best. His whole dedication to life was quality and to give the people what they deserve when he was charging, you know? So the hamburger was made the best hamburger in the world. He says, if they like my hamburger, they're going to buy the buns, the hamburger, the onions, the beer, the pop. And Union Pacific became one of the most successful stores. And from then on, he built the first big supermarket called Big Dipper Market on Brush and Brewster. It was an amazing first large format store in the Afro-American area. Well, I tell you, I recommend that everybody, and I made all my children, anybody, whether you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever you want to be, there's nothing like retail. Retail is communicating one-on-one. You must always work retail, whether you work as a busboy or waiter or whatever it is. The retail taught me a lot. It taught me communication between me and the consumer and the customer. And it made a better businessman out of me because I wanted to treat the customers the way my dad treated me. I'll never forget the first lesson he ever taught me. A lady brought in some milk in the bottle. We used to sell them those days. And he said, the lady said, the milk is spoiled. So he says, we'll give you your money back. That was my dad's policy. So as soon as he walked away, I started smelling the milk. He hit me so hard, that's why I have a flat head. He says, why did you do that? You call the customer a liar. Whatever that lesson has been very important to me as a retailer. You never, ever discredit a customer, make her feel like 2 cents that you're smarter than she is. Because all customers are smarter than I am. That's the lesson that I learned in retail. Well, when it worked with my dad, I remember telling him, Dad, I want to be your partner. I want to build more stores. I want to make money. And we were eating dinner, and he says, Eddie, this food in front of me, you want half of it, or do you want to get your own food? And I thought about it in a minute. Of course, I want to get my own food. He says, then go find your own store. Go find your own destination. Don't worry about doing what I'm doing or what your brothers are doing. You be the leader, and I have all the courage in you, because I could take you, and he always believed in me, because he called me Adil, that everything was going to be straight. He never did nothing without me standing next to him. And he was like, you know, I was like, I should say I was the favorite son, but there were 6 of us. Anything he did, I was there. And I just had to believe that I was going to make it very big in retail. I wanted to succeed in doing something different. And that's why when I opened many stores in Detroit, the first few stores I opened were called Trade Winds. But Trade Winds were only in Detroit area. So Julie said one day, why don't you open a store in the suburbs? I said, oh, I can't do that. You know, I mean, I'm not ready for the suburbs. But then she convinced me, and everything I am sitting here today is because how Julie pushed me to do more than I should do. And we opened our first store at 17 Mile Rochester Road, and it was called The Merchant of Vino. And I owe everything to her because we were at a Pepsi Challenge tasting, where is Pepsi better or Coke better? And she says, who's that next to you? I said, his name is Mike Giancotti. She says, I remember his store in 17 Mile in Rochester. Ask him if he wants to sell it. I said, I can't ask him that. I said, ask him if he wants to sell it. So I said, Mike, do you want to sell your store? He says, yeah. And that's how we opened our first large supermarket, only of wine and cheese. Wine and cheese and coffees and candies. And that was, we learned that by going to our first trip in 1971. We were married 10 years. And I said, Julie, what do you want? She says, I want to go to Europe. I want to go to France. I want to see what they're doing. And so we went to France for 10 days on a budget, and we stopped at every winery, fine restaurants and everything. And on the way back, Julie has this thing about asking me wherever we go, even visit somebody, what did you learn today? And I says, I don't know. She says, what did you learn? She says, the women in France were wearing blue jeans, high heels, candy shoes, drinking Perrier and wine. And Eddie, you better get in the wine business. And that's how the Merchant of Vino started. Well, the whole thing about, you have to be passionate in what you're doing. You have to be, you know, today, like Julie was saying, we are so proud of the Chaldean communities, of the doctors and lawyers. I never had that opportunity. I was a self-taught man. I only went to high school, but I feel like I went to the best college in the world working with my dad, because there's nothing like working with family. They will teach you something that you just have to be patient and learn, and don't fight them. When we opened the Merchant of Vino, it was 14,000 square feet of just wine. And the people weren't ready for wine. People drank liquor. They weren't ready for such a thing. But I took my success a little step further, not knowing what I was doing. So there was a free press writer, her name was Tish Meyer. She used to come in the store, she lived in Rochester. She would buy a couple of wines and cheeses. She was very European style writer. She wrote for the Detroit Free Press, their food column. So she said, I want to do a story on you guys. I want to feature you because I love what you're doing, you know? And so I said, of course, you know, so she did the story, and it appeared in the Free Press, was before Thanksgiving, a full page of our store and wine and collection. And I got a call from Hal Youngblood. I said, yes, sir. He said, you know who I am? I said, no. He says, I'm Mr. J.P. McCarthy's producer, and you're the Merchant of Vino? I said, yes. I believe now I was the Merchant of Vino because he said that. So anyway, he says, why don't you come to our radio program and let's talk about wine for Thanksgiving. We were supposed to go there for about 10 minutes. Julie did the most beautiful cheese tray with flowers and everything. And I took the cheese tray to his room. He was on at 6 in the morning. And we were supposed to be there for 10 minutes. We almost spent a half hour. And I popped a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne. And he goes, pop, wow, what is that? I said, everybody should have a nice glass of wine or champagne with their turkey. And so the phone didn't stop ringing. People were calling me all over. JP was very impressed. And then we became good friends, and I used to be on his program at least once a month talking about wine. And that was, you know, in everybody's life you need a break. Something in your life pivots and tells you you're going to make it. And J.P. McCarthy, not only him, but Dick Purton was another one. Sandy Sylvan was another one that wrote the beautiful stories about Julie's Catering. So, and after we became very successful in the food business, we wanted to give back to the community. And my dad says, you always have to let the customer win. You have to let the people win. You can't always just take. You have to be able how to give. And Julie came up with the idea of, we used to have these young ladies from the Sarah Fisher home that were pregnant, and they asked us to do a donation for the kids. And Julie said, let's do a wine tasting. And we started with the wine tasting to invite 100 people. We sold 500 tickets that week at the Sarah Fisher. That was the first charity we ever did. And that charity ran for 10 years, and we raised over $1 million every year. And then we started doing other charities. There was, we did, when we opened stores in Ann Arbor, we did for the Mount Children's Hospital. The Detroit Wine Auction we did. And we also brought a lot of wine people. And what Julie and I did every year for 2 weeks to 3 weeks, we used to go to Napa Valley and camp out in a little motel. And we used to go to people, we want to sell your wines in Michigan. They said, why Michigan? They wanted to sell their wines in New York and Chicago and Florida. But I thought Detroit deserved to have the best wines. And they used to convince people like Mondavi, like Fisher, like Rombauer, and Heights, all these people that we deserve to sell these good wines in Michigan. And I used to beg them. And as I brought them, restaurateurs, and I brought the winemakers here, and that's how I became involved with all the restaurant people in the, because I used to bring the winemakers here, like Angelo Gaia and all these people from all over the world came to my store, and we promoted their wine, but their wines were so much promoted that they went into selling them in the restaurants. Well, again, we learned something from every trip, and I just want to have to say something to all the people that are just starting in life. You learn so much by traveling. You can't learn by staying home. You have to go outside of the box to learn. And we were in Evian, and I was supposed to get a massage, but I was too nervous. So the lady gave me a bottle of water, and the water was Evian. I said, wow, this is good water. I said to Julie, let's stay one more day and see if I can sell it in the United States, because we don't have bottled water in the United States at that time. So I went and talked to the president of Evian Water, and he looked at me and he looked at back, and he had a map of the United States, and there was, he says, Michigan, they have too much water, I can't sell you. I said, I'm gonna buy a container, 1,200 cases of Evian water, and I'll sell them. And I'm gonna pay you ahead of time. And I did that. But it took me 2.5 years to sell it because still nobody believed in doing it. Until it was the Golden Mushroom. I got them to buy 50 cases of water, and they start charging for water. And that's what the restaurant did, start charging for water. And it became a thing now when you go to the restaurant, sparkling, still, what do you want? And that's, I feel and I had the franchise for almost 15 years before I lost it. I have to tell you the feeling of Mexico. I honestly believe Mexican people are Chaldean. I really do this because they have the similar look and the feeling and the hospitality. And if you look way back, Spanish people came to Mexico, and the Spanish people actually are originators of the Chaldean people. So anyway, I got attached to the people in Mexico because actually the climate of Cabo is the same climate as Iraq, same equator. So our weather is the same. You know how we used to sleep on top of the house, the garro? It's the same. If anybody has not experienced Cabo San Lucas, please do. And I love the food, I love the culture, I love the people. And I contribute my life, as old as I am right now, because I was fortunate enough to retire at the age of 60. And I've been there for, 70 I retired. I've been there almost 27 years. And I love my life. Not only love my life, I enjoy having my kids come, because we bought a nice big house. And when the kids come, we're on the beach, they sit on the beach, we take a bonfire, we tell stories. I tell stories about my dad and about the milk story and about other stories, and the kids enjoy it. And what it brings us is that I have my family for 10 days. It's not like visiting them for one day. They're there for 10 days, and we kind of bond in each other. So now my kids come, my granddaughter Gabrielle comes and stays a whole month. You know, only what I hear back and forth. I didn't follow them, but I know there's a lot of Chaldeans. My favorite thing about Mexico, every year for 10 years or 15 years, we go somewhere in Mexico and see, but I never ran into Chaldeans. I heard a lot about them, but never ran into them. But I know they're there. Well, my message to the young Chaldean people is this. Learn a little bit about other cultures. Plan for 5 years, 10 years ahead of what you're going to do. And don't be afraid to keep doing it till you're there. So it's a journey. So I believe that whatever you have in your heart, whatever you feel you can do it if you put your heart into it. So the message I say to you, college is good, education is good, but being a good communicator and being a good person is more important in a good family than any education you can serve in the world. And travel around the world, and you'll learn so much more from the people and what their culture is and how hard they work. And you know, one of the best things that I ever did, I always talked to people older than me, and I listened to them, and I wanted to be what they could teach me. Because you talk to people the same age as you are, you don't learn. I used to talk to people that are 30, 40, 50 years from me, and what I learned from them is amazing. And I know today's culture is like, well, we don't do this like we used to. We don't do this like, but we are, how should I say, we're the solid bread and butter after you start with the dough. So we know where we're doing. And I believe that you can learn a lot from our older community. Okay, one of my favorite stories is get off the bus. What does that mean, get off the bus? We are sometimes so stuck with our job and our security. We get on the bus, we know where the next stop is, we know how much the fare is, we know where we're going, so we don't want to get out of the bus. It's like getting out of the cage. And my story today, that you have to get off the bus and find out what your future is. Don't worry about where you're going to go, what your next job is. Just get off the bus and give yourself a chance for other opportunities.